So it's all to play for still.
I think so. Do you want to bet against us?
Hello, everybody, and welcome to For the Love of Paul McGrath podcast. I am delighted to be joined by Jordan from La Liga and Beyond again. And today we're, of course, we're talking about something to do with Spanish, with the Spanish League and with a Spanish man who's come in and taken over the reins at Aston Villa with immediate effect, and that is Roberto Olabes. And Jordan, first of all, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing good. Obviously, this story feels like it's sort of come full circle for me because I sort of shared with you at the time about Monchi and San Fernando, and obviously he was trying to get more involved there and trying to save the club. So then, obviously he's now left, and it's Olabe that's coming now. So feels like a real full circle.
It's been a whirlwind last 48 hours, I think, in the boardroom, I think, for Aston Villa. But it's funny that, I suppose when news like that breaks out of the blue, maybe out of the blue, I think for a lot of people, was out of the blue for me when Monchi was moved to a different role within V Sports, which I think beggars its own questions in itself. But it was seems like it happened apropos of nothing, and then almost immediately, Roberto Olabes was named as the next man up. It obviously is intriguing to see that, considering that a lot of this goes through, a lot of everything goes through the main man at the top, who is Unai Emery. He has, basically the power of the pen, I think, in a lot of aspects with regards to the casting vote. So I suppose it's well known that Roberto Olabes and Unai Emery would have had previous together, obviously playing together. They have that relationship together from Almeria as well. But what I wanted to do is delve more into why I think that Roberto Olabes was signed for Aston Villa, or came on board at Aston Villa. And that's essentially because he's done, from an organizational point of view, I think it's fair to say that he's done quite a good job at Sociedad. But Jordan, tell us a small bit about Sociedad before we get into this, because I think a lot of people fail to grasp the how much they punch above their weight within La Liga, within European football in general, teams from that Basque region.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, they really punch above their weight. They're by city, they're the smallest city to have ever hosted a Liga winning team. So they won the title a couple of times in the 80s with an all Basque team as well, which makes it even more incredible. And I think people in the UK sort of know that it took until the late 80s for them to move away from their all Basque model, but they still it took until 2000 for them to even sign Spanish players that weren't from the Basque region. They still prioritise the cantera, like you were saying. The academy is massive for them, and that's what's brought them in a lot of money over the years. Even this summer we saw with some of the players that have left, that is still a big thing for them, and to have academy players is huge for La Real. They also always try to have as many in the team as possible, but there's been times where they've probably had more players from their academy playing in La Liga than even like Athletic, who we typically see as the big Basque side in the region, because Athletic if you come from San Sebastian, Athletic are sort of notorious for taking some of the best prospects from Real Sociedad. So they've really got a conveyor belt of talent. Gipuzkoa, where they're from, they've had so many incredible players. Half the Premier League feels like it's at some point come from either that province of Spain or come from Real Sociedad. So they've really, over the years, developed a lot of talent and really punched above their weight to become European regulars.
They've a cracking track record of creating good managers as well, don't they, in that area? It's like as if it's like as if everybody has their back against the wall, and it's like it's back against the world kind of mentality, and that they're going to make it's like golfers in Northern Ireland. I think somebody put it to me before. You're never too far away from a professional golfer in Northern Ireland, but you're never too far away from a massive success story in the footballing world if you walk around the Basque Country in Spain. That's the way it was put to me before.
Yeah,
A real hotbed.
I agree that they're football crazy there. I mean, even the derbies, and they're not the derbies that you would typically know in the UK because they stand together, they drink together before the game, they really interact together. It is Basque against the rest of the world, and that's how they see themselves. And yeah, he's obviously Olabe's been there for 3 times now, and he's created something special almost every time within those 3 spells, which again is just incredible, really, that a club of that size, it's less than 200,000 people in the city, and they've been able to win the Copa del Rey in this latest spell. They've been able to reach the Europa League. I think they've gone out to Man United a couple of times. They've made the Champions League. They've done some incredible things during this spell.
Absolutely. And is it, obviously to build a club like that and to have a structure, because you mentioned there that, half like the amount of players in La Liga that come out of the Basque region and are able to and move to different clubs, come from that hinterland and from that hotbed of academy football. Obviously the guy that we've signed here, that we've brought to Aston Villa, and Roberto Olabes, he would have had a good hand in that, given his background of previously was obviously a youth coach at Sociedad. We know about his time in Ecuador as well, setting up academies there, and also his time in Qatar, setting up academies with the Aspire Academy 2, should I say. Was that his number one focus, do you think, at Sociedad, or was that just like, is it going to be everybody's focus when they go into Sociedad? Or what I'm trying to get at here is did he bring that aspect more into focus in the current in the current climate of football that we live in, and did he push it forward from where it was previously?
Yeah, so I think he had a real free hand because of the job that he'd done in Ecuador and Qatar in terms of the academies that he built up. So he had a huge involvement in the training ground that Real Sociedad have had over the last couple of years, really revitalising that. The club have developed Anoeta. It went from one of probably the worst grounds to go to in terms of fan experience to one of the best. They removed all the athletics track. They moved all the seats closer. They made it a real great stadium to go to again, which it never used to be when they first moved there. And yeah, in terms of him, he's really sort of focused on the academy, focused on sort of bringing in players and selling them on for more than what they hopefully paid for them. And even if you look at the B team, which I know a lot of people don't like to look at B teams in senior football, but over the last few years, they've actually had a B team in Segunda, which is the
That's what I was
second
going to
tier.
say.
Yeah, they had a season under Xabi Alonso, which obviously at the time we all sort of attached to Xabi Alonso and what he was as a coach, and they almost stayed up that season, and then they ended up coming up this season as well. And they've had a better start than what we probably thought they would do, given that it is such a small area that they come from, that they're not in the bottom floor and they're already playing quite well. They've beaten Real Zaragoza. They've done some things that have surprised people who watch Segunda already. So, it's Real Madrid's, their B team are in the 3rd tier. Barcelona's there in the 4th tier. And then you've got Real Sociedad, who've got their B team, the only B team in the 2nd tier. So it's a testament to him on that side that they've been able to sort of build that up over the years, and he's been able to get coaches coming in internally, such as Xabi Alonso, and then they've had Sergio, who's gone on to the first team. It's obviously been a struggle so far this season because they've had a bad start to the season, but they've not had to go elsewhere for those coaches. They've developed them themselves, and I would imagine that Olabe's been a big part of that.
And that's actually really interesting, because what you paint a picture there is more almost like a nodal social club. And what I mean by that is that it becomes more, it takes on the role of almost like an identity within the region. That's a best thing again, as we mentioned previously. But I've always felt that he who captures, or the team that really captures the West Midlands, really captures the West Midlands to the degree of the amount of talent that is there as well. And also that can make it a destination spot, I suppose, for maybe kids who are in London, or maybe in further north, that can come and make their way through the academy there. I think because of just the fact that it's the second city, and the population base that is there, I think it's going to be very beneficial for whoever can do that. And Villa are best placed to do that. And the reason I bring that up is it sounds like this guy creates things that kind of, I would say, have tentacles to them from the point of view of longevity and sustainability. And that to me seems to be one of the reasons why Aston Villa have brought him in. Can you talk to us a small bit about that? About, is it as cut and dry as this guy was the mastermind behind that, or is that just the way that Real Sociedad have always been?
I mean, they've had peaks and troughs, and that's sort of to be expected because of the region that they come from and how they bring talent in. I mean, if you look at, before he came in 2018, they had struggled. They had David Moyes, and they had spells where they looked like they might drop down to the second tier. I think in some ways you can't give him all the credit, because the likes of Arrazabal and these players that were coming through, they were already in the pipeline before he came. But where he was good was in the early days. He was able to bring in, Isaac. He was able to bring in Odegaard. He was able to bring in these players, and also experience as well, in terms of like David Silva and a couple of others, where he could bring in experience and he could bring in gambles basically to complement the Basque players that they had. So they gambled even on like Miguel Merino. He had come off a bad spell at Dortmund. They were able to get him before Athletic, and he'd always been in the media sort of destined to go to Athletic, but he turned up at Real Sociedad and they really sort of revitalised his career. So I think they'll always look to go internally, and he will always look to go internally in terms of trying to find solutions to the squad. But when they need to, he will obviously sign outwards as well, and that was something he did very well in those early years, where they really brought in players that hadn't worked elsewhere. I mean, Isaac hadn't worked at Dortmund, similar to Merino. Odegaard hadn't really clicked at Real Madrid. He couldn't get the game time, and they gave him that game time, and we saw the difference. And he also hired a coach that probably many others didn't really see as being a coach, and it delivered their best moment in the last 20 years when they beat Athletic in the Copa del Rey final.
Talk about that coach for a moment as well, yeah, and why potentially he wouldn't have been seen, just for people who may not know.
So it was Imanol Alguacil, and he was a Basque coach that really didn't have much of a track record before Olabe came in. So he had only been in the academy system of Real Sociedad. He hadn't really had a glamorous career. He'd played 100 games for Real Sociedad, but there was nothing really to say this was the next big coach. But they sort of gambled on him. They gave him a very young squad at a time where they had really struggled. They had sort of gone through coaches that tried to find their way again. And when he came in, he sort of, especially in the early years, he really, really changed how they played. They played really good football in those early years. They gave those young players, like I said, an opportunity in a second sort of home where they maybe hadn't fitted in at that top level. They came down, and that sort of proceeded then to them go on and become European regulars, which we hadn't really seen out of Real Sociedad over the 21st century. They'd had an early spell in the Champions League in the early 2000s, but then they dropped down to Segunda. They'd come back up, but they'd never really looked like challenging. And all of a sudden, they sort of captured the imagination with how well they played under Alguacil. And, I don't think many would have tipped them to have won the Copa del Rey, and they fully deserved it by the end of it. And it was just a shame that was a game that was played with no fans there, because it could have broke all sorts of attendance figures or exodus figures for a population leaving a region to go to another region in Spain.
Yeah.
And we saw Real Sociedad back in the Champions League again, and we saw a lot of things that were really positive. I guess the one negative is that, his relationship, Aguasil's, with the squad had broken down, and he probably should have gone sooner. It had gone quite stale. I think
That's a really interesting piece here, because I can hear a lot of people already typing into the comments when this goes live of, ooh, because there is I don't know, obviously I've no inside information, but there is a narrative around Aston Villa at the moment that Unai Emery's relationship with the players has gone stale. I don't personally believe it. I just think that they're going through a rocky period currently at the moment. But the fact that you say that this guy kind of gave somebody a small bit longer than they should have will prick up a lot of people's ears, I think, when they're listening to this podcast, because, as I said, there is a cohort of people that believe that, there's a cohort of people that don't believe that, and that's fine. I think that the truth probably lies somewhere along the middle.
Yeah, and I mean, like, it actually got public in terms of Arathabal was really quite, after the derby, he had really sort of been quite outspoken about the coaching and some of the decisions in that game, and they had lost quite heavily. So it did sort of get public where it probably shouldn't have gone, and that sort of showed us what we already sort of suspected, that the relationship had sort of broken down, because that was the captain coming out and saying those things, and saying that, some of the decision making and the substitutions and the way of playing wasn't right. So for that to come out in public, it only comes out when it's reached a certain point. There had been sort of discussions earlier, a couple of years earlier, around maybe trying to bring Xabi Alonso up from the B team and into the first team. That it seems that sort of got blocked, and that Aguasil didn't want to make way at the time, which you can understand because of the success he had. But yeah, it did feel like that last season was really stale. They scored something like 35 goals in the league last season, and they've carried that into this season. That's sort of the worry, is after that first wave of really good signings like the Odegaards and stuff, the players that came in to replace those haven't matched that level. They've been, and they've been disappointing, and a lot of clubs in La Liga don't have money to spend. They've not been able to spend money. Like, that's not really been the case in Real Sociedad, because they've been able to bring in so much money. They have had money to spend, obviously not relative to the Premier League, but for La Liga, they've had a good amount of money, and they haven't necessarily spent it wisely in this last couple of seasons.
And I suppose just to highlight some of the names, is there any off the top of your head maybe that haven't worked so far?
So they spent 20 million on Umar Sadiq, who he had a good spell at Almeria before them, but he's really disappointed. He had a serious injury, which you can sort of understand, but he came in as a replacement for Isaac with Mohamed Ali Cho. Ali Cho is now, I think he's playing in France now, but between them, they scored 5 goals in 80 games. Obviously, Sadiq is still there. They haven't been able to shift him because he's on big wages and on a big contract. And since they've lost Isaac, they've just had nothing up front. They've really, really struggled. They spent 20 million last season on the Icelandic striker, who's really sort of struggled as well. He's young, and that's where they gamble, as they go young and bring them in from maybe that second sort of tier. So he had come from Copenhagen, and again, he's not really hit it off. And I think that's where they sort of struggled these last couple of years. When you go through the actual signings that they've made, they're just not of the same quality as that first batch of players, when you were seeing the likes of Odegaard coming in and immediately, they had a real distinct style of play. Teams couldn't handle them. Whereas this sort of second wave of batches in the second end of his spell at the club, it just hasn't worked the same. They've sort of gone to the Premier League for loan transfers. They had a guard last season to replace Lenormand, and he hasn't been as good. They signed Sergio Gomez from Man City, and he's had some good moments, but would you say he's really improved them? Not really, and that's probably where it had gone a little bit stale, maybe across the board, not just at the coach level, but maybe also at sporting director. And that's, I'm not sure why he left a year early, but he chose to leave a year early, and I do wonder if part of it was the recruitment in the squad.
I wonder, yeah, and I suppose I wonder really, like, is it a case of the story is untold just yet with the staleness of the, and this isn't me trying to absolve him of anything, because obviously I
No.
don't know the in-depthness that you do. But like obviously he signed a lot of players that were like, I think the oldest signing he signed was Sergio Gomez, as you mentioned there, left back, 23 years of age, who has flattered to deceive from somebody who should be playing better than he was. He's taken a step back in his career anyway, but like, I wonder, is there a case that if there was a staleness with the coach leaves, new coach comes in, that's a pivotal signing. But in 3 or 4 years' time, could you look back and just go, yeah, it took them a time to find their feet. But once again, it was obviously a concerted plan that they had, was to sign very, very young, and to try and grow them that way. Specifically, I suppose,
Yeah.
within the that particular season that you mentioned, last 24-25.
And I do wonder as well, like I was saying, in that sort of first couple of years, so more towards the like 2020, they were signing the likes of Odegaard, like I was saying, but they were also bringing in the experience of David Silva that could add to the squad. You know, David Silva he had a terrible injury that obviously ended it, but he was just a great person, I think, to have around the squad, and to have the likes of Kubo and these sort of players that were playing with him develop around him, and having like Isaac playing with someone like that rather than having someone at the same age as him around him. I don't know if that was a difference as well, but that seemed to sort of stop in the second half. They weren't really signing those more experienced players as additions to what they already had. They just seemed to go for that lower profile of player in terms of age.
And again, they've also brought up a lot of younger players as well. Even last year, like John Martin is in there, and what's the Venezuelan guy? Oh, Venezuelan right back. He's been integrated into the first team. He was
Aaron
Aram
Baru.
Baru or so. Aram
Yeah,
Baru. Yeah, I can't pronounce it as well. You know, they've integrated those guys into the team, which obviously I suppose further kind of showed the kind of, I suppose, realistically the reset that they went on with that youth focus.
yeah.
As well, because they were all brought in the same year as well as those younger signings. Do you think that came from a boardroom level, or do you think that was just something that was maybe, if you mentioned, as you mentioned, that the coach was kind of felt that the situation with the players is getting stale, that he drove that youth influx, or do you think it came from boardroom level?
I mean, it's a hard one
Is it
to
hard to
answer.
know?
Yeah, I guess it's like, because they've seen the profits, you might not necessarily see the profit on a player like
Yeah.
David Silva because he leaves for nothing because of an injury. But you're seeing the profits when you're signing someone like Isaac, and you sign him for 10,
Mhm.
15 million and he goes for 70. So you can see why clubs would be attracted to just going for those younger players. But sometimes those older players that mix in with that squad, they bring a lot more that you don't see in terms of on the balance sheet.
Mm.
And I guess that's where you'll probably get more leeway in the Premier League and at Villa, even though I know there's lots of talk about FFP at Villa. I would say it's still not as restrictive as what we have in Spain. And yeah, Real Sociedad have been able to actually spend money because they generate so much money. So
And that,
yeah,
but
it's a tough one
uh,
to know where it came from.
it's one of these things. He gets the credit for generating the money, but then you also
Yeah,
have to double, like it's that's then you also have to get the credit again for how do you spend that money do you generate, you know? So is it a case
exactly.
of, do you live long enough to become the hero, or do you stay long enough to become the villain? I suppose is the old adage there. And look, I think, you've mentioned a couple, and it's always good, and this is exactly why I get people on who can speak with a lot more knowledge on situations than absolutely I could. So it's always good to get that balance of, well, listen, he's not the Messiah. Nobody that comes into your club is probably going to be the Messiah. So it is good to know that as well. But he did leave Sociedad with a lot of plaudits and a lot of praise from the people of
Absolutely.
Sociedad and the club itself. He will go down as being one of the more highly thought of board members that they've had in recent times.
Absolutely, yeah. I don't think there was any intention from the club to end the project that he had. He had such a wide scope, like I was saying earlier, in terms of he was sort of given the keys and said, like, run this club, which, he's done some excellent things. And he was linked to Arsenal for a very long time. I think everyone sort of presumed he would just end up at Arsenal, which hasn't happened. So that's, in a way, it's a coup for Villa, because maybe clubs have judged it off that last 18 months. Whereas if you look at his whole 7 years in this third spell with them, if you look at that tenure, he's done incredible things. He's brought them up from being a club that was sort of in the bottom half to European regulars, and they've won a trophy. Like we were saying at the very start, it is incredible for Real Sociedad to be doing these things. As much as they have a history behind them, it's a city of 200,000 people. It's incredible that they're able to, punch above their weight like this. So yeah, I think he will always be left as a legend there. He's had 3 spells there. All 3 spells had successes. He's built things at Ecuador. He's built things in Qatar, and he did a lot for the Aspire Academy there. So I think he will always be sort of very highly rated in Spain, and sporting directors are always highly rated in Spain. I think the job is more valued. I guess the flip side is he is known as someone who likes to not really be in the limelight, and the Premier League is probably the most limelight league there is in the world. So it will be interesting to see how he sort of handles that. I was saying earlier, obviously, with the San Fernando stuff, I saw some of the stuff going on around Monchi and some of the criticisms that people felt he wasn't focused on the job. I wonder how Olabe would sort of deal with that side, because he doesn't typically like that. And although there is sort of regional papers, the main national papers will always focus on Real Madrid and Barcelona.
Yeah.
Can get on with the job when you're at Real Sociedad, or you're at one of these clubs like Osasuna. You can sort of get on with it without being in the limelight as much. Whereas it sort of feels in the Premier League, every club is under the lens in a different way.
Well, I think just the high profile drop off of Aston Villa this year will put him under the lens. But you know what? The best way to get the lens out of your face is to produce, because in the Premier League, once again, as you mentioned, yes, the focus is on. But when Aston Villa are producing, because it does turn into the Unai Emery show, as it has been, and rightly so, over the last 3 years as well. So I think he has a good deflection point in Unai Emery. He has somebody who will be able to, who people will go to because they know more about him, and people will be able to talk about him more. But there will still be column inches written about this guy, regardless of what happens. And look, I think a lot of the papers have dealt with the Monchi exit pretty fairly. I think that they've done it in a pretty measured way in a lot of ways as well. And as I say, I said an exit there. It seems like, given his exit statement that he had there as well, that he wants to pursue other things, wants to get back to Spain, and it doesn't seem like he was too they seemed pretty amicable, and it seemed pretty pretty much like it was a mutual situation whereby they wanted to bring this guy in. He was like, you know what, in fairness, I wouldn't mind getting back to Spain. I've just bought my local club, and I'd like to run that as a plaything now for a while, if you don't mind, and we'll see what happens.
I think interestingly, he's actually doing a press conference tonight at San
He is.
Fernando. So we might actually see some stuff come out of that, because he'll be with the local press as well, and San Fernando is very close to Seville, and obviously people are already talking about, could he potentially become involved in Sevilla and try to help them with the situation they're in.
He can never stay away from Sevilla, as we know.
No, he really can't, and obviously it's so close to his hometown anyway. It's it'd be interesting to see what sort of comes out tonight, and if we get any more detail around like where that decision was made and how sort of mutual it was. But yeah, I think it sort of seemed on the Spanish side, like the media there, that he had been sort of looking to come back to Spain, and when San Fernando were sort of put in this situation, and he realised that there was going to have to be a new club formed, he seemed to very much get involved in that side. So yeah, it will be interesting to see.
What level are San Fernando going? I presume they're going to come in at like literally entry level there, because did they go bust?
It's a very bizarre situation, because they actually had no debts. So it seems to have been on the whims of the ownership group, more around the club being relegated, and it's very obscure. We've not really been able to find a reason, and there's lots of great local journalists that I sort of follow that have tried to find this reason, because there's no debts, there's nothing owed. They didn't have a financial reason to end the club. They didn't even enter negotiations to sell the club to Monchi, which is what he was trying to do with the local council. They just wanted to shut the club down. So yeah, they will start in the 7th tier, which will be the Andalusian regional 2nd division essentially. So that they've dropped down 2 tiers from where they'd gone to, and they've got to start everything from scratch basically.
Yeah.
But I mean, they've already got over 4,400 socios, so they've done incredible things already, and they've done a big online drive to try to get people from around the world to support the project. And I mean, they've got Sergio Ramos involved, they've got his brother involved, and obviously Monchi's the president. So they're really trying to set it up and get the club to sort of progress through the tiers again, which unfortunately we see all too often in Spain. We've had a lot of these clubs that have had it, but this is probably the first time where we've had it and there's been no debts, which is just bizarre.
They're trying to do like an FC Andorra type of Phoenix from the Flames kind of situation, rise through the leagues, which would be good. The Spanish Wrexham.
Spanish Wrexham, yeah, exactly. But they actually went into liquidation in 2011, so this is their sort of third go. But this time it's just not finances. So yeah, we'll have to see where they get to.
Yeah, and look, that could be something, you know, that legacy could be worth more to Monchi than anything he could do, you know, in within Aston Villa or within Sevilla. You know, sometimes the pull of the heartstrings can be worth an awful lot more than the thrill of the chase from a career point of view as well. So it'd be interesting to see what does come from that conference. And it's going to be, as you said there, it's going to be highly looked at, because Monchi's, you know, to people who know football, he's a European standard household name. You know, really, when you mention Monchi, there is only one. You know, so it's going to bring a lot of eyeballs and a lot of ears to that press conference to see what does come out of it tonight.
Yeah, and I think obviously Monchi was so highly rated, and whether he's done as well in this second notch of his career compared to when he first came through, you'll probably know more around that in terms of who he signed for Villa and stuff. But I think, you know, that sort of the new sporting directors that have come through, Olabe is definitely rated as one of those that is, even though he's been doing this a long time, he's sort of seen as that next generation and very, very highly thought of in Spain. So it's interesting that he was sort of picked as the successor. And like you said, he again has that working relationship already with Emery. He also has had a brief spell as a coach as well, so he should understand that side of the game. So it'll be very interesting.
Excellent. Yeah, and it's great to finish on that point, you know, that Aston Villa have in a lot of ways pulled off a coup with signing this guy here. You know, but it's always nice to get the fully rounded view on somebody prior to them starting in the role, so that we can judge accordingly then on his successes and non-successes, because I don't want to say that there's ever a failure at Aston Villa, so we'll call them non-successes, and then judge him accordingly then onwards. And Jordan, thank you.
Sorry, I was just going to say, with a sporting director, sometimes you don't actually know the success or not till 5 or 6 years down the line, because their job isn't a short term as a coach. You know, their results might not pay off for 5 or 6 years. So it'll be interesting to see that side as well and see what legacy he leaves, because we maybe haven't seen the best legacy at Real Sociedad in terms of on the pitch this season.
Well, I'm all for it. If he can smuggle John Martin in his suitcase and bring him on, I just, as a young centre half, 18-year-old, I think he's really good. Smuggle him, bring him to Aston Villa, just arrive with him someday and say, surprise, there you go.
Poor Real Sociedad, they're going to lose another player to the Premier League, I think.
Yeah, but as I say, when money comes calling, well, then again, I'd say that Aston Villa mightn't have the money for it. When money comes calling. It does knock loudest at the Premier League, unfortunately, for other clubs. Listen, Jordan, thank you so much for everything. Really appreciate it. You know, it's been great insight. Everybody, if you are interested, Jordan looks or is part of La Liga and Beyond, and also the Segunda podcast as well, Jordan, if I'm not mistaken, as well. So if you want to keep up to date with Spanish football in the first and second division, there's no better person than to go look for it than for Jordan. So thank you so much for your time, and we'll have you back on with any more developments that happen from Spain.
Yeah, perfect. Hopefully you'll have me on after all the success he has at Villa. So yeah.
Excellent.
Nice.
Thank you so much. Thanks a million, everybody, for watching and for listening. Really, really appreciate your time. We've got a busy week. There's going to be European football for Aston Villa this week as well. So you'll be sick of seeing me. But in the meantime, stay safe, stay healthy. And all that's left to say is up the Villa.